Henriette Hoffmann was born on the 13th of January 1913, the eldest child of the photographer Heinrich Hoffman and his first wife, the singer and actress Therese Nelly Baumann, who died in 1928. She was the eldest child. Her brother Heinrich came along 3 years later. Henriette spent her childhood in Schwabing, often considered to be the artistic district of Munich. Here she came into contact with the Nazis from an early age. Heinrich Hoffman was a friend of Hitler's and was one of the first members of the party, joining even when it was still called the German Workers' Party, before it became the National Socialist German Workers' Party on the 24th of February 1920. Henriette was 8 when she first met Adolf Hitler in 1921. As Hitler's political career advanced, so did the business of Heinrich Hoffmann, who got not only business from photographing other Nazis, but also the rights to sell Nazi publications and busts of Hitler. Added to that was the obvious kudos of being Hitler's photographer, which no doubt got him even more business than anything else. Let's face it, if you were some racist, anti-democratic nutjob in Munich, you would be happy to pay double to get your photograph done at the same place as Hitler rather than go to another photographer. Whilst Henriette Hoffmann was studying at the University of Munich, she also helped Hitler out with the secretarial work. This brought her into direct contact with even more people who were to wield power in the future Nazi state. She also knew the Hitler inner circle, people such as his niece Gerli Rabau, and of course she knew Eva Braun even before Hitler met her. Eva Braun was then working as an apprentice at her father's photographic studio. She met Baldur von Schirach, the then leader of the Nazi Student Union and probably the youngest member of Hitler's entourage, for the first time in 1931. Hitler would have been pleased with the match. Here we see him with Henriette and other ladies at the New Year's Eve ball on the 31st of December 1931. Henriette married Baldur von Schirach on the 31st of March 1932 in Munich, with Adolf Hitler and Ernst Röhm acting as witnesses. As far as Nazi royalty was concerned, one could do no better in 1932. There's a video on YouTube where you can see an interview between British television personality David Frost and Baldur von Schirach. The interview dates to 1967. Von Schirach comes across as a charming, well-spoken aristocrat who is very approachable. His English is impeccable. Indeed, it's all he spoke until he was 5. What needs also to be remembered is that he was the leader of the Hitler Youth. He had sole control over the education system in Nazi Germany, and thus he was responsible for engendering the hate, racism, and motives of entitlement that led to the dreadful crimes of World War II. Von Schirach deserved to be one of the major war criminals put on trial at Nuremberg. Between 1933 and 1942, Henriette gave birth to 4 children: Angelika Benedicta, Klaus, Robert and Richard. After their marriage, Henriette von Schirach became a member of the Nazi Party, membership number 263026. She did not exercise a function in the party apparatus. Her role was that of a good Nazi wife, that is to say, mother in bringing up 4 children. She identified herself with the goals of her husband, which sought control over the education system in the Reich. Baldur von Schirach was a big hit at the Nazi rallies. In the Nuremberg rally of 1934, he appeared with Hitler, rousing the Hitler Youth audience, and this was all filmed for Triumph of the Will, the propaganda film made by Leni Riefenstahl. Now, this is a bit ironic in the light of later circumstances, which you'll hear about if you'll be bothered to watch the video until the end. During the campaign in Western Europe, her husband took part and he was awarded the Iron Cross before being recalled. He served with the 4th Machine Gun Company of the Großdeutschland Infantry Regiment. He got promoted from Gefreiter, which is approximately equivalent to corporal, to that of lieutenant. On the 8th of August 1940, Schirach succeeded Josef Bürkel as Gauleiter and Reichsstatthalter of the Reichsgau Vienna. This is roughly equivalent of a governor, so therefore it's a very powerful post. There were 23 such provinces which had Gauleiter in Nazi Germany. Joseph Goebbels, for example, was the Gauleiter of Berlin. When he took on this role, he was replaced as Reich Youth Leader by Arthur Axmann, although he retained his position as the Reich Leader for Youth Education. On receiving the post, the whole family moved to the prestigious Vienna Hofburg. The whole time von Schirach, unlike most Gauleiters, remained a part of the Hitler inner circle. Here we can see him chumming up with Hitler and Goering at the Berghof. And of course, he was part of the ruling class too. Here we see him about to greet Hitler after the dictator returned from the Munich conference to Berlin in October 1938. Hitler is shaking hands with Philipp Buhler, who was to lead the so-called euthanasia program, the killing of people who were physically and mentally challenged. Next in line for a handshake is von Schirach. Von Schirach was an anti-Semite, although he tried to downplay this after the war, and for that also please see the David Frost interview, for which a link is given below. On the 15th of September 1942, Baldur von Schirach made a speech in which he said that the deportation of Jews was contributing to European culture. Jews from Vienna were deported to places like Izbica in Poland, and from there to the death camp at Auschwitz. Von Schirach may or may not have known about the death camps, but in any case, he had to know that what was happening to the victims was not pleasant. However, it was an incident related to the Holocaust that made the Schirachs persona non grata at the Berghof. This would be the last time Henriette stayed with Hitler. Henriette von Schirach visited friends in Amsterdam. One night, while she was there, she was woken up. In her own words, "I heard screaming outside the hotel late at night, so I went out to investigate. I saw Jewish women and children being bundled into transportation to be deported. I then asked a German soldier what they were doing, to which he replied, 'What Hitler is doing in Holland is wrong. We are making enemies of the Dutch, which is a big mistake. Make sure you tell Hitler the next time you visit the Berghof.'" She did make sure she told Hitler about it, and once more in her own words. "So I told him what I'd seen. Hitler's reply was, 'You are sentimental.' He stood up. I stood up. I said, 'Herr Hitler, you ought not to be doing that. I thought I could allow myself this because I'd known him for so many years. I've hurt him deeply. What's more, in front of other men who were there.' Then Hitler said, 'Every day 10,000 of my best soldiers die on the battlefield while the others carry on living in the camps. That means the biological balance in Europe is not right anymore.'" In other interviews, she gave a slightly different version, where she made an appointment to speak to Hitler, and the Nazi dictator asked about her trip to the Netherlands. When she told him what she had seen, he screamed at her and said that she was sentimental. She had to learn to hate, and asked what rounding up of Jewish women in the Netherlands had to do with her. She left the room. An orderly caught up with her and told her to leave the Berghof immediately. So there's a slight difference in the two versions, but there are more witnesses to it. In any case, that was it. They left the next day, never to come back. They were banished. Goebbels, who witnessed it, wrote in the privacy of his diary that the Schirachs only discovered their sympathy after almost 60,000 Jews had been deported from their doorstep, as it were. Indeed, by then, the number of Jews deported from the territory in the care of Baldur von Schirach was probably considerably more. Albert Speer, who saw the incident, later said, "Afterwards it was a gloomy mood. You knew that something had happened, but no one said anything about it as far as I know. That was the reason why Henriette von Schirach and her husband were banished from the court." Hans Hermann Junge, Hitler's valet, also witnessed the incident. He was killed in the Battle of Normandy in August 1944, but he told his future wife-to-be, Traudl, who recounted it thus. Henriette von Schirach had a relatively informal and friendly relationship with Hitler. She approached the Führer about what she had seen in Amsterdam and said how terrible the Jews were being treated there. Thereupon, Hitler angrily advised her not to interfere in things that she did not understand. He was angry about this sentimentalism and sentimentality and left the room. So, although there's slight differences, I think the general message is the same in each of the eyewitness accounts. Surprisingly enough, we have a second-hand account of Hitler's version of events, which is completely different. Nicholas von Beller was Hitler's Luftwaffe adjutant. He kept a diary which unfortunately was lost at the end of the war, and he tried to put it together afterwards, which ended up being a book. He wrote that on the 24th of June 1943, Baldur von Schirach and his wife were at the Berghof. He had a long and extensive talk with Hitler, the contents of which Hitler told me on one of the following evenings. Schirach had told Hitler unambiguously his conviction that the war needed to be ended one way or the other. To this, Hitler added, "How does he imagine this? He knows as well as I do that there's no way out, apart from me putting a bullet in my head." Hitler was very excited about his talk with Schirach and made it clear that he would have nothing more to do with him. And that was their last ever meeting. Of course, both versions could be true, and that Hitler was already wound up when Henriette tried to speak to him. So, possibly, they both happened. Even if you were no longer best friends with Hitler, Baldur von Schirach retained his post as Gauleiter of Vienna. One great advantage of being part of the establishment elite is that one is entitled not to have to be bombed with the riffraff. After the first heavy American air raid on Vienna, Baldur von Schirach sent his family to his country estate, Schloss Aspenstein in Bavaria. Vienna was not a main target, but nearby Vienna Neustadt was with its oil facilities, and therefore Vienna could expect more bombing raids. Baldur von Schirach surrendered himself to US forces in June 1945. A decision was made to try the most important Nazi criminals at Nuremberg, and he was one of the 24 put on trial, later reduced to 23 following the suicide of Robert Ley. On the 1st of October 1946, Baldur von Schirach was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment by the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal for crimes against humanity, chiefly related to his deportations of Jews from the Austrian capital. After the end of the war, Henriette von Schirach had to leave Aspenstein Castle and was initially housed with her 4 children in a forester's house in Jachenau, and later she was able to upgrade her accommodation to living in a hotel there. In 1949, she filed for divorce from an imprisoned husband. She was now in a relationship with Leni Riefenstahl's ex-husband, Peter Jakob. Her marriage to Baldur was dissolved on the 20th of July 1950. After World War II, the estates of those implicated in the National Socialist regime were confiscated by the states in the new West Germany. The Schirachs lost their property in 1946. However, in 1955, Henriette von Schirach bought Baldur von Schirach's former country house with 4,312 square meters of land in Koche am See for 1 Mark 45 pfennigs per square meter from the Free State of Bavaria. After 10 months, she sold the country house for double what she'd paid for it. In a report from 1971, the Bavarian Court of Auditors found that the price of the land had been 2 marks 50 pfennig as early as 1939. This scam worked so well that she had another go at it. In 1960, she convinced authorities to return to her 278 pieces of works of art that she had owned during the war. She had to pay, but the prices charged may not have been full value. I'm just going to take one piece here as an example. So this one here is called Holländische Platzbild. It's a view over a Dutch square. It was a painting originally which belonged to a Jewish couple, Gottlieb and Mathilde Kraus. This is an approximately 300-year-old copy of a work by the Dutch painter Jan van der Heyden. The original is in the Louvre in Paris, but the copy may also have been the work of the original painter. The Krauses were so keen on art that they used to open their apartment up for others to peruse their collection. Following the Nazi occupation in March 1938, they fled, leaving everything behind. The possessions of the Krauses were confiscated by the Gestapo, and the painting was acquired by Henriette's father, Heinrich Hoffman. This, in turn, was confiscated by the Bavarian state after the war. From there, it was entrusted to the Bavarian state painting collection, which was supposed to ensure that the works were returned to their rightful owners. Instead, the Bavarian authorities sold many works back to former Nazis as so-called return sales. Henriette paid 300 marks for this painting. She later sold it on for a profit. Today, the painting hangs in Xanten Cathedral in Germany, which is said to have acquired the picture for 16,100 marks. The descendants of the Krauses now live in Washington. She may not have been married to Baldur any longer, but she tried to obtain a pardon for her ex-husband. Here we can see her in Oxford Street in London in the late 1950s, taking in a spot of shopping whilst trying to get her ex-husband released from prison for his part in the murder of tens of thousands of people from Vienna. Some parts of the press in the UK were calling for the release of these mass murderers. However, British Foreign Minister Selwyn Lloyd from the Conservative Party refused. Her ex-husband served the full 20 years of his sentence. Here you can see him at a press conference following his release. He died on the 8th of August 1974. Henriette von Schirach turned to writing to support herself, presumably because no more scams were available. In 1957, her book The Price of Glory was published. In 1982, her Frauen um Hitler nach Materialien, a collection of anecdotes about Hitler, came out, in which she described Hitler as an easygoing Austrian and someone who wanted to make himself and others a little happy. Henriette von Schirach died on the 27th of January 1992 in Munich, aged 77. If you want to see her grave, it's in the Nordfriedhof in the Bavarian capital. Thanks for listening. I upload every Friday at 2000 hours Central European time. That's 7 in the evening in the United Kingdom, or it's 11 in the morning in Los Angeles. You might want to subscribe, or you might not do. The decision is yours.